The morning sunlight filtered through the linen drapes, casting soft golden streaks across the polished hardwood floor. Emily sat at the edge of the bed, her silk robe clinging loosely to her frame, the warmth of her morning coffee doing little to stir the chill that had settled in her chest. Across the room, Mark buttoned his shirt in silence, the sound of each fastening echoing louder than any words they hadn't exchanged. He was dressed impeccably as always, gray suit, navy tie, perfectly pressed. Yet to Emily, he felt like a stranger wrapped in familiarity. "You'll be late," she said softly, hoping for eye contact, even a smile. Mark glanced at his watch. "I've got a meeting downtown. I might be back late." No kiss. No touch. Not even a lingering look. The door clicked shut behind him, and the quiet that followed was heavier than his absence. Emily stared at the untouched half of the bed, a constant reminder of everything they no longer shared. 8 years of marriage had unraveled into a series of predictable routines and empty gestures. What once felt like a partnership had eroded into polite cohabitation. Mark had become more invested in his spreadsheets than in her presence, more animated on Zoom calls than in their late-night conversations, which had long since stopped happening. Later that afternoon, Emily met Claire at their usual cafe. The chatter of espresso machines and distant laughter offered a reprieve from her quiet house. "You look drained," Claire observed, leaning in with concern. Emily forced a smile. "It's nothing. Just tired." Claire raised a skeptical brow. "Tired? Or tired of pretending you're not miserable?" Emily's silence answered that. "You need something," Claire continued. "Something that's just for you. Join a class. Take a trip. Hell, get a gym membership. Shake things up before you fade into the wallpaper." Emily chuckled weakly. "A gym? That's not exactly my scene." "Maybe it should be," Claire said. "It's not just about squats and treadmills. It's a space to feel alive again." The idea lingered longer than Emily expected. That night, as she lay alone in bed, Mark snoring softly beside her, the thought took root. She didn't want to become invisible, not to herself. 2 days later, she found herself standing in front of Pulse Athletic Center, feeling slightly foolish and out of place. She hadn't worn leggings in years, and even the act of tying her shoes felt oddly foreign. The receptionist greeted her warmly and handed over a trial schedule. Emily nodded absent-mindedly, scanning the class names, but one detail caught her attention. "Personal training sessions available," it read. "Ask for Derek." Her first session was the following morning. As she entered the training area, a tall, broad-shouldered man approached her. His skin was deep and smooth, muscles defined under his fitted athletic tee. His presence was commanding without being aggressive, his smile both disarming and confident. "Emily?" he asked. She nodded. "I'm Derek. Let's get started." From the moment he spoke, she noticed the contrast. His voice was warm, grounded, yet edged with subtle authority. During their session, he observed her closely, her posture, her pace, her hesitations, but never made her feel inadequate. When he corrected her form, his hands were firm but respectful, and his words carried a strange intimacy. "You're stronger than you think," he said, after helping her up from a lunge. Most people don't push themselves far enough to know. Emily felt a flicker of something she hadn't felt in years, seen, acknowledged, desired, even if only for a moment. By the end of the hour, she was sweating, out of breath, and strangely exhilarated. Derek handed her a towel, his fingers brushing hers just briefly, but enough to send an unexpected ripple through her chest. "Same time next week?" he asked. She hesitated, then nodded. "Yes. Same time." As she walked out of the gym, something in her felt awakened. She told herself it was just the workout, just adrenaline. But as she passed by a mirror in the lobby and caught her flushed reflection, eyes glowing, lips parted slightly from exertion, she wasn't so sure. There was a flicker of something else behind her gaze. Something she hadn't seen in a very long time. And that scared her. The days that followed seemed to stretch longer, yet Emily found herself counting down to her next training session with a strange sense of urgency. Each hour spent in her quiet house now felt amplified, Every clink of a spoon, every tick of the wall clock, echoed in the void Mark had left behind. When Friday finally arrived, Emily dressed with more care than necessary. She told herself it was about comfort, choosing the leggings that hugged her curves just right, the form-fitting top that accentuated her shape. But deep down, she knew it was something else. Derek was already at the gym when she arrived. His shirt clung slightly to his chest, damp from his own warm-up. As he approached, his eyes swept over her, briefly, but not without notice. "You look more confident already," he said, handing her a water bottle. Emily smiled, trying to appear unaffected. "Maybe I'm just getting used to this place. Or maybe you're starting to recognize what you've got," he said, voice low, eyes holding hers a beat too long. The session began, but the air between them had shifted. Each movement felt more charged, every instruction laced with an undertone that hadn't been there before. When he positioned her arms during resistance work, his fingers lingered just a second longer than needed. When he guided her through a stretching routine, his hands pressed against her lower back, sending warmth spiraling through her body. "You're holding tension here," he said, touching the small of her back. Emily swallowed hard. Probably from sitting too much. Or from keeping things bottled up, he said, his tone casual, but something in his eyes said otherwise. By the time the session ended, Emily's muscles ached, but the burn she felt wasn't just physical. As she wiped sweat from her brow, Derek leaned closer. "You're stronger than you think," he said again, repeating the phrase from their first meeting. But this time, it didn't feel like a motivational platitude. It felt personal, intimate. She nodded, unable to speak through the whirlwind of emotion brewing inside her. That evening, Mark returned home earlier than expected. He walked in, briefcase in one hand, phone in the other, barely glancing her way. "Did you eat already?" he asked. "No, I was waiting for you. I had something at the office." Silence followed. He disappeared into his study without another word. The sound of his door closing felt like punctuation, a full stop to everything that remained unsaid between them. Emily sat at the dining table alone, picking at a plate of food that had gone cold. Her mind drifted to Derek, his voice, his touch, the way he looked at her like she mattered. Later that night, Mark climbed into bed beside her. He turned off the lamp without a kiss, without a conversation, without even noticing the longing in her eyes. As his breathing slowed into sleep, Emily stared at the ceiling, emotions churning beneath her skin. Was it wrong to crave something more? Something deeper than routine and polite indifference? The next day, Emily found herself at the gym again, this time without an appointment. She didn't expect to see Derek, but there he was near the weight rack, towels slung over his shoulder, speaking to another trainer. Their eyes met. Something flickered between them. Recognition, curiosity, and a subtle acknowledgement of the unspoken. He walked over slowly, wiping his hands. "Didn't expect to see you today. I just needed to clear my head." Derek studied her quietly. "Rough night?" Emily hesitated. "Something like that." He nodded toward the cardio area. "Come on, walk with me." They climbed side by side onto two treadmills. Neither spoke for a while, the rhythm of their footsteps filling the silence. Eventually, Derek glanced over. "You ever feel like you're living a life that doesn't belong to you?" The question hit harder than she expected. She turned to look at him, unsure how to answer. "I feel that way sometimes," he added, sparing her the need to respond. "Like I'm just going through motions someone else set in place." Emily stared ahead, her voice barely a whisper. "Every single day." The words hung heavy in the air between them, and in that shared silence, something unspoken passed between two strangers, something electric, dangerous, and undeniably real. When she left the gym, Emily didn't look back. But deep down, she knew the line between her and Derek had begun to blur. And there was no going back from that. Emily told herself it was the last time. One final session with Derek before she pulled back, before things crossed into a territory she couldn't navigate. But as she stood in front of the mirror that morning, applying a shade of lipstick she hadn't worn in years, she knew she was lying to herself. Derek greeted her at the entrance with his usual charm, But this time there was something different in his gaze. Less trainer, more man. Less professional, more deliberate. "Good to see you again," he said, his voice low and smooth. Emily smiled, pulse quickening. "Likewise." The gym floor was unusually quiet, the usual hum of machines dulled by the midday lull. Derek led her toward the private stretch room, glass-walled, yet secluded. The moment the door clicked shut behind them, the air felt heavier. Today's session was slower, more intimate. The exercises less intense, but layered with physical closeness. Every movement became a moment, every stretch, every guiding touch more deliberate than necessary. "Relax your shoulders," Derek said, stepping behind her, placing his hands gently on her upper arms. "Let go of the tension." Emily inhaled deeply, trying to steady her nerves. But his nearness was intoxicating. The scent of his cologne, the warmth of his breath against her ear, it stirred something primal within her. "You're holding everything in again," he whispered. "It's not easy to let go," she replied, her voice softer than intended. He turned her slightly to face him, eyes locked on hers. "You don't have to pretend with me." For a moment, neither of them moved. The silence stretched, dense with unspoken intent. Then, as if drawn by gravity, his hand brushed her jawline, thumb trailing along her cheek. Emily didn't pull away. She couldn't. Their lips met, tentative at first, then deepening with urgency. His kiss wasn't gentle, it was hungry, unapologetic. And when his hand slid down her waist, pulling her closer, Emily's resistance collapsed entirely. In the dim stillness of that room, everything blurred, her conscience, her loyalty, her sense of right and wrong. The only thing that remained sharp was sensation, the roughness of his palms on her skin, the power in his grip, the rhythm of his breath against hers. He laid her gently on the mat, his body pressing against hers with a dominance that both startled and thrilled her. Every movement was deliberate, every touch a declaration. The way he took control, the way he knew exactly how to move, it shattered the carefully built walls around her. Emily gasped beneath him, overwhelmed by the intensity, by the stamina he possessed, by the raw physicality of it all. Nothing in her marriage had ever felt like this. No encounter, no embrace, no whisper in the dark. She was consumed, devoured in a way she'd never imagined. When it was over, the room fell into an eerie quiet. Emily lay still, body trembling, heart pounding as Derek stood and offered her a towel, his breathing only just beginning to slow. She sat up slowly, reality crashing over her like a wave. The high of pleasure quickly gave way to the low of guilt, the sting of betrayal seeping into her bones. "I didn't plan for this," she said quietly, avoiding his gaze. "Neither did I," Derek replied, pulling his shirt over his head. "But some things don't ask for permission." She couldn't argue with him. Not after what they'd just done. But a part of her wished she could turn back time, erase the moment before their lips met, before everything changed. Emily dressed in silence, eyes focused on the floor. As she reached for the door handle, Derek spoke again. "You don't have to explain anything," he said. "But don't pretend it didn't mean something." She hesitated, hand still on the handle, then nodded without turning back. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "I won't." Outside, the world looked unchanged. Cars passed, people jogged. The sun still shone. But inside her, something fundamental had shifted. She sat in her car for several minutes, gripping the steering wheel, tears pricking her eyes. Not because she regretted what happened, but because she couldn't deny how alive it had made her feel. That night, lying beside Mark in the same bed, Emily couldn't close her eyes. Not because of guilt, but because her body still remembered the fire Derek had lit within her. And in that moment, she knew something terrifying. This wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. The morning after didn't come with confessions or confrontations. It came with silence. Emily moved through her day as if on autopilot, washing dishes, folding laundry, checking emails, each task performed with mechanical precision. But beneath her composed exterior, her thoughts spun uncontrollably. Every flash of memory from that afternoon with Derek burned in her mind, The way his hands had held her, the hunger in his eyes, the way her body had responded without hesitation. The pleasure had been undeniable. But so was the guilt that now settled heavily in her chest. At dinner, Mark talked about quarterly reports and an upcoming seminar in Chicago. Emily nodded at the right moments, smiled when expected, and offered polite affirmations. But she could feel it, the growing distance between them, a chasm that widened each time he looked through her instead of at her. "I might be gone for 3 nights," Mark said, cutting into his steak. "You'll be all right on your own?" Emily sipped her wine, eyes fixed on the flickering candle between them. "I've been all right for a while, Mark." He looked up, briefly puzzled, but didn't probe further. He rarely did anymore. Later that night, while Mark slept soundly beside her, Emily stared at the ceiling, her fingers grazing the skin Derek had touched only days ago. The craving returned, not just for the physical thrill, but for the way Derek had made her feel seen, wanted, claimed. By morning, she had already received a message. "Derek, still thinking about it?" She didn't reply right away, but the words haunted her throughout the day. When she finally responded, her message was simple: "More than I should." Hours later, another text buzzed in. "Derek, you know where to find me. Just say when." Emily stared at the screen for a long time, heart pounding. A part of her wanted to delete the message, to erase every trace of the affair. But another part, a louder, bolder part, ached to go back. Not just to him, but to that version of herself who felt alive again. Claire noticed the shift first. Over coffee, she tilted her head and studied Emily with narrowed eyes. "You're glowing but also jittery," she said. "Something's up." "Nothing's up," Emily replied too quickly. Claire leaned back. "I've known you since college, Em. You're hiding something." Emily hesitated. "Let's just say I've rediscovered a part of myself." Claire raised a brow. "Should I be worried?" Emily gave a faint smile. "Maybe. But I'm not." That night, as Emily stood in front of the mirror, she saw a version of herself she hadn't recognized in years. Her cheeks held a flush that no blush could mimic. Her lips curled in a subtle smirk she couldn't suppress. And her eyes, dark, restless, hungry, told a truth her mouth never would. Mark kissed her goodbye the next morning before leaving for his business trip. It was a quick peck, thoughtless and routine. He didn't notice how tightly she clutched the doorknob after he walked out. He didn't see the storm brewing just beneath her surface. By noon, she was back at the gym. Derek was already there, waiting, confident, composed, unreadable. Their eyes met. No words were exchanged. None were needed. But Emily hesitated, her fingers trembling slightly as she reached for the locker key. In that moment, she realized she stood at a crossroads, not between 2 men, but between 2 versions of herself. The woman who followed the rules, and the woman who dared to break them for the sake of feeling alive. Derek approached, stopping just inches from her. "You came back," he said. Emily met his gaze, a flicker of defiance in her eyes. "I never really left." A smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Then what are we waiting for?" But Emily didn't answer. Not yet. As she walked past him toward the training room, her pulse quickened, not just from anticipation, but from the terrifying realization that desire, once awakened, doesn't simply fade. It grows, it consumes, and it demands more. And deep down, Emily knew the truth. This wasn't just an affair. It was an escape. A secret she wasn't ready to give up. And maybe she never would.